Kayla couldn't join us. Because Kayla couldn't join us today, she asked that I sort of give her the highlights. If you wouldn't mind helping me out with that, that would be fabulous.
No problem.
Thank you. So let's just do a quick overview of sort of our core committees and then go into what we have today is an initial report out on the business advocate data. So health and safety committee headed up by Colleen. She has been giving regular reports at the commissioners' work sessions, and I don't think there's a town hall scheduled yet, but there is ongoing information on the Facebook page as well. So I'd recommend staying up to date on that. Is there anything you'd like to add, Commissioner Mudge, on the health and safety update component? Okay.
No.
Okay. The next one, Mass Care, just to let folks know that we are continuing to provide individual financial assistance in the community. There continues to be a significant need for this. The Unmet Needs Committee meets every other week now, and we reviewed 18 applications today. We are seeing a trend of folks affected by COVID who may have gone back to work and then are unable to work if they have to quarantine. So that's been a bit of a challenge for families. And then food assistance continues. Oh, Kayla's able to join us. Yay. Hi, Kayla. Hi.
Can you repeat that and or just say a little bit more about that? People who are able to go back to work but then have to be quarantining. I apologize.
Yeah, folks who have been able to return to work and then have either been exposed to symptoms or have come down with symptoms and have had to quarantine.
That is a finding space is the challenge, and
no, well, it's just that their economic impact of that,
right?
Not being able to, yeah, that's the biggest piece
okay.
of that. Yeah, we have provided in the community. We've provided some assistance for lodging for folks who needed to sort of separate from people who were quarantined for a temporary time period, but yeah, it's unfortunate. We're just seeing a trend of folks who are just getting back to work and then ended up being exposed and having to either quarantine or coming down with some symptoms themselves. So it's not, huge numbers, but it is a portion of the folks requesting assistance.
Aren't the is the EPSL emergency? Oh geez, or EFM?
For public health?
Just with the Families First Act, is that not extended through and cover them through the end of the year?
So it can cover the need for non-congregate shelter, which would be lodging for quarantine, but doesn't cover rent or utilities.
Okay. I think okay. I was thinking more so that it covered salaries to an extent, but anyway,
well, yeah, okay, yeah. I hear what you're saying. Like, if they have to leave due to that, I think it depends on the employer and the work situation. So, if somebody, yeah. And we could probably look at that a little bit more closely too to find out what some of those specific work situations are. And these are folks who don't qualify for any other form of assistance.
Right. Okay.
Typically.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's a good question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, but in terms of lodging and other assistance, there is assistance for folks for like hotel stays if that's health related. But and then food assistance continues. I was not able to participate in the last food task force meeting, so I'm not sure exactly what the level of demand has been at St. George's. I can check into that. But I will say that also in the next week or so, Pandemic EBT will be launched in Colorado, which means that for every child in the household who was enrolled in school this fall and was on free and reduced lunch, that family will get $279 per child. And if they weren't in the free and reduced lunch program, there's a way for them to still apply. Those funds will be automatically loaded onto a family's EBT card if they are receiving SNAP, or it will be mailed to their household if they have not been on SNAP. That will be coming out in the next week or so. It's a little over $100 million in the state of Colorado. So that should provide some relief around the time that I believe the dinner delivery to families of food is sort of dropping off. So hopefully that will help get folks through for another month or so. As most people know, the unemployment, additional payment, pandemic unemployment is ending this week. We do expect to see an increase in public assistance. We are seeing the highest level numbers of applications in our history. And we know that there's going to continue to be an increased workload. So that will continue on, I think, as it's been taking a while for some folks to be able to find or get back to work. And then the fourth committee is the Communications Committee, and we'll jump back to the third one when we come back to economic recovery here. But the Communications Committee has been talking through communications plans, coming up with some goals. And one of the things that's sort of come out of that committee is the need to develop a structure for communications, whatever that might look like in terms of whether it's a database or a central communications point that can be utilized not only throughout the rest of this pandemic, but for any other future emergencies for city and county governments to be able to communicate effectively with local businesses. Anything you'd like to add to that on Communications Committee, Chad?
In our last meeting, Kaylee Ham was kind enough to join us to discuss the Office of Emergency Management and kind of the distinctions between their role versus the role of Lake County Public Health Agency. She let us know they were involved in an after-action review, and most of our groups will be participating in some way, shape, or form with that. We discussed how we saw the group, the Communications and Marketing Subcommittee or Committee fitting into the larger communications strategy moving forward. So we talked about the tourism panel having a seat at that table, and some other of our organizations having a seat at that panel. Kaylee mentioned specifically that at the beginning of this of the response efforts, the state wanted the county to set up a virtual joint information center, but for various reasons that wasn't really working for our community. But our particular committee, the Marketing Communications Committee, or a version of something like that, could help to develop some sort of joint information system moving forward. So I think we'll be looking toward that as at least part of our goals moving forward. Kaylee also communicated that although Facebook might be the preferred point of communication for a lot of folks, for an incident of this size, it has really proved fairly insufficient. And that communications plan moving forward should probably include fundraising or allocating some funds for a paid position in regards to public information, and that being able to reach all of the businesses, as we've talked about before, has been an ongoing struggle. So we need to align the effort of getting that contact information and that knowledge. We need to align that with the larger communication system. And just reiterated that the lack of a high functioning and useful website as a central point of information is a huge concern for the Office of Emergency Management. And they might be exploring doing some things on their own outside of the county website process. So those were really the highlights from our last meeting. Donna, did I miss anything? Kristen?
No,
Hey, Chad. Chad, this is Kayla. Is the recommendation to have like a paid PIO position, or have some of those communication responsibilities lie with a paid position like a recovery coordinator position?
I'm not sure a specific recommendation was made in regards to what that particular position would look like, where it would be housed, or if it would be an existing position that was kind of where the responsibilities were kind of updated or changed. Just that in order to help with a better response and a more centralized communications mechanism, that should probably be something that's explored.
Chad, are you facilitating that group?
I'm hoping not to. Noah really was. He is out of the office this week. Yeah, I really, unfortunately, don't have the bandwidth to try to take those kind of reins, but I'd be happy. Again, I'm happy to help in any way that I can. So
Gotcha.
I will. And Donna's in that group as well, so we can certainly communicate back with them directly.
Yeah, okay. Okay, great. No, I know that there's been, I think it's important for the board too to weigh in on some of that and participate there. So I don't think I've gotten separate emails about that. Maybe I've just missed them, but yeah, definitely would like to chat about creative ways to address that, you know, not recreate a new platform necessarily, but I think we have some thoughts there. So let me know when the next one is, please.
All right, we'll do. I'm not sure if we've scheduled one. Have we yet, Donna? I think we're waiting until Noah gets back.
no, I don't have one on my calendar yet.
So just to sort of jump on to that, and thanks for the update, Chad, from the last conversation, and to speak to the process within the Office of Emergency Management. They're doing sort of an agency by agency needs assessment to try and get an understanding of not just in terms of this incident, but more broadly, what their ongoing needs are for external communications, so that can really help inform more broadly what sort of solutions might ultimately be suggested or proposed or talked through with the decision makers within the county. So that process is underway right now, and we've got meetings scheduled over the next 3 weeks with sort of core responding agencies, and we'll sort of concentric circles move out into different stakeholder groups. But I think doing sort of a thorough and standardized interview process with each of those agencies with a needs assessment lens is then going to allow us to kind of get the bigger picture holistically of what the bigger needs are, so that we're not in a reactionary place again, you know, not only for just standard emergencies and incidents, but, you know, should something of this scale or magnitude hit us again or come in a next strong wave, that we're prepared for it. Good. Donna,
So-
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say this is not directly related to the previous topic, but I wanted folks on the call to know that the tourism panel yesterday submitted an application or a letter of interest for CRAFT funding, which is Colorado Rural Academy for Tourism. And we'll know something by the end of this month, hopefully. the state, this is through the state tourism office, and they are waiting to see if they're going to receive CARES Act funding. So that will determine what might be available. But we believe it would be workshops and then some implementation funding, and probably those funds would be used to partner further with the state office on some of their initiatives like that we're currently doing, their social media and other digital efforts. And so I'll keep you all posted, but looking at who's on the call, I know Chad participated, but just huge thanks to Chad and Marla and Noah, and I know I'm forgetting someone, Tracy too, but for coming together, and Andy down at Twin Lakes, and just sharing ideas for, you know, the impact that we've seen on the community. And I think we put in a really strong application. And so fingers are crossed that we will be able to get some assistance down the road.
Yeah, and those thanks go right back to Donna for coordinating that effort and putting that letter of intent together. Thank you very much, Donna. I think that is a strong entry, and we'll hopefully be hearing some good news.
My pleasure, and our fingers are all crossed.
Good. So as you all know, the work of the Communications Committee and the Economic Recovery Committee, in connection with all the work they're doing with the businesses in communicating with them, is overlaps quite a bit too. Let's get to the economic recovery, but first, as a part of that, I wonder if Kayla, you, and then maybe if Commissioner Mudge wants to add anything to it, want to talk about the Recovery Act, the CARES Act funds that the city and county received.
Yeah, so we applied for the CARES Act funding, the $697,000. That's a pass-through from the federal government to counties and municipalities, and we were awarded the full amount. We've split that amount between the county and the city, so the county will receive 83% of that. The city will get 17% of that. So right now we're just in the process of, going through the administrative work to make sure all of our T's are crossed and I's are dotted for reimbursement purposes, and then developing a philosophy for utilizing that CARES Act funding. Sarah, do you want to add to that a little bit?
No, I think you summarized it well, and we have not decided on where that money will be allocated as of yet, but we need to do that pretty soon. And I also suspect that we should again be sure to tap into some of these subcommittees like the communications, because that is certainly on, I know, like Kayla and my list of how to better get information out and share information, within as community communications, interagency communications, and that emergency management kind of state, kind of the different tiers, I guess, is how I think about it. How can we tackle some of that?
Okay. Any other updates? Donna gave us an update on the funding the tourism panel is looking at. Commissioners talked about funding coming to the city and county through CARES Act. Is there any other funding anyone wants to update on?
Based on our last meeting, I did do some follow-up in regards to the closure of lanes on Harrison Avenue here in Leadville. I spoke with a couple of communities about parklets, and in particular, I spoke with the Longmont Downtown Development Authority about the closure of some of their lanes, some of their parking lanes, that is state highway, to see about, what kind of process they went through and whether that made any sense for us to explore here in Leadville. Kimberly McKee with the Longmont DDA told me that there was certainly a large investment in money and staff time up front for that project. The biggest piece of that puzzle was a very in-depth and involved traffic management plan and a monitoring plan for that traffic that was necessary in order to submit to CDOT and the Federal Highway Administration. But once that in-depth traffic management and monitoring plan was in place, the rest of the process with CDOT and the Federal Highway Administration was actually fairly efficient, she said. And then the other investments were jersey barriers required to block off traffic, and then they used some funds to paint the jersey barriers. They added lights and a bunch of other infrastructure as well. Again, the process, once all of the staff time for those management plans were in place, was actually fairly straightforward. And they're reporting pretty positive results overall, but there have been increases in traffic delays due to those closures, which some folks have been complaining a bit about. They're not huge delays. I think that would be a major concern here in particular throughout the summer. And then I'm not sure if it makes sense to do much too much further after the summer. Marla and I have been unable to connect and walk around to try to identify any other spaces off of Main Street that would make a lot of sense for parklets in particular. I'm not sure from a personal standpoint if trying to locate some on any side streets or in alleys makes the most sense for parklets. I think we could activate those spaces probably without the need for that large expense. But I do believe Sarah Dallas has some other opinions on that. So I'm not the last word on behalf of the city. So don't take that into consideration. But that's the information that I've gotten in regards to those items that I was tasked with.
This is Sarah again, and I was hoping to make it short so that Kayla would still be here and hear some updates from Chad. But I also wanted to let folks know that, you know, I am still learning and pursuing funding resources for open space and environment and recreation management. A presentation and partnership with Chaffee County. You know, there was a statement made that really resonated with me, that people are kind of, we're going through a trauma, we're grieving losses and new, you know, scenarios in life. And people are also grieving the loss of their space in their community that they kind of hold sacred. And, you know, I know we're seeing a ton of increased motorized vehicle use, and I don't think that this has been a high priority on the conversations that have gone on in recovery right now. But I think it's really important. It's going to be important, and it's going to be a byproduct that's just going to hit us and happen unless we, keep paying attention to it, which I am. And so things like managing dispersed campgrounds or creating larger parking for, you know, maybe increased snowmobile traffic. I mean, we've been trying to do that anyway. And I know that people keep, you know, it's a crystal ball. We wonder if tourism is going to have a lull, but if it's going the way it is, we're going to get people up here who don't know what the heck they're doing all through the winter, driving motorized vehicles and that kind of recreation. It's going to be insanity. So I have been continuing to work on that aspect of things. And if anybody's interested or has any other information or people for me to talk to, please share with me.
Sarah, this is John Trineri. I just wanted to pass on one additional thing. It's not just driving around now, but I think as Leadville and the county start opening up events, that the congestion associated with those events with proper planning and parking can help meet that social distancing problems that will come up. It might mean a change in location of where the event is held, but with proper foresight of thinking about those events, which are very important to the community, I think it's more than just campgrounds. I think it's tremendously around those events, which we've essentially closed off this summer.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah,
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I would be really interested in knowing what you're thinking on that too, and would love to collaborate, because from the tourism panel, when we go to highlight something, I want to make sure that it's an area that you feel like we have enough capacity. Like right now, we just did a camping guide, for example, to try to give people information on everything related to camping, because we're seeing so many campers come through, and they can stop in town and that sort of thing. But I'm thinking specifically too about the winter trails. I know in the past that we've wanted to promote those, but then there's an issue with parking for them. So I'd just love to stay in touch to know if there are particular things that you want us to highlight, or feel like it would be better to drive people into other areas instead.
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate that, Donna. And I think, Kayla and I definitely need to do a better job at participating with the tourism panel, especially now when it's kind of, when these, conflicts are kind of maybe getting it a little more, just rising to the table a little bit. But thank you.
Sure.
Sorry, I have to remember to take myself off mute. Okay. Anything else that folks feel like they need to talk about or want to talk about before we get into the initial results from the economic recovery surveys with businesses? Beth?
No, I don't know why it thought I wanted to say something, but thank you.
You're being pressured to comment here.
Apparently Zoom thinks I should, but no, I'm eager to hear the survey results. So drum roll.
Okay. Chad, do you need to share screen or anything, or is it just a verbal report?
It's going to be fairly extensive, and I apologize for that. I wanted to provide the most and the best information I could. I would love to share my screen to show you the written report that I have while I am talking about it. In the future, there was just a very short amount of turnaround time for Marla and I from our Tuesday meeting till now, and we wanted to wait till we had the most amount of results. In the future, my plan is certainly to prepare a PowerPoint or something along those lines so that this will be more easily communicated and won't be so wordy moving forward. But if you wouldn't mind allowing me to share my screen, that would be great.
Is that a meet to allow that?
I think, Chad, I think you should just be able to.
I'm good.
You got it?
I think so.
All right, it looks like it.
Can you see that? All right.
Yeah.
Can.
Fantastic. So again, I really wanted to start with the fact that we will provide them in a more digestible format next time. And I will certainly email a copy of this report out to each of the participants in this meeting. I think there's a couple folks I may not have email addresses for. Kristen, would it be possible if I send you a copy of this, could you get this out to the group that's here?
Sure.
All right, fantastic. Thanks again for always being so helpful, Kristen.
No problem.
I did speak with Gloria Perez with Líderes Latinos this morning. She's unable to be here this afternoon, but we do have a meeting scheduled for next week to discuss some of the results of their efforts and to put in a plan to fold the feedback they're getting from the Spanish-speaking business owners into the Google Doc or the Google Forms that we've set up, that Kristen set up, so that we can fold those results together. So as of now, we have not included the Spanish-speaking business owner feedback in here yet, but that will be in place by next time we do the report. So I'm going to try to get through this first part relatively quickly and then get to the meat of the feedback, if that's okay with everyone. We have 35 as of Tuesday at around noon that have been reported in the Google Forms. These are conversations that generally occur between June 30th and July 20th. So 35 is a pretty good number. We were hoping for 50, but 35 is good, and we have more on the way. We have broken those results down by industry and sector. General retail is kind of a bigger umbrella that we're using, and we had 16 of those. The breakdown in there is as follows. You can see professional service, part of that, an attraction in a museum, some recreation, marijuana, etc. We have 4 under the category of restaurant and or bars. Those are ones without lodging attached. We have 3 in the lodging category, a couple that do also serve food as part of providing lodging. We have 3 that are in the real estate, property management, long-term rentals field. We did not include any short-term rentals in this particular iteration of our outreach. We have 2 in the medical industry, 2 in the personal service industry, and then 1 in those other industries that you see there. So one of the first questions we really asked folks to report back on was, when you contacted the business owners, did they give you any general feedback? Fortunately, we got 19 really positive reviews, like thank you very much, and only 3 negative ones. Some did not provide any response. The main takeaways that Marlon and I identified from the feedback we got for that question was that the vast majority of the business owners we talked to were supportive of the effort, more than willing to participate. And I think this one's really important. Some were, however, skeptical of the actual outcomes and frustrated that the effort was not made earlier. We need to make sure that there are actual outcomes from this particular effort. A couple believed, I think Kristen probably talked to both of these folks, they believed strongly that government should have no role in regulating their business, or that government couldn't help, government could only harm. And then some were hopeful it would help government see things from their industry's perspective. And a few were surprised and encouraged that the effort was countywide rather than focusing simply on Harrison Avenue and Leadville. So we're doing a good job of reaching outside of the borders of Leadville. The next question we asked about confidentiality concerns. Most of the business owners really didn't have any concerns, but a number of them did. Some would not have shared their story without our commitment to that confidentiality. So we need to keep that up and keep that in the forefront of our minds. Most of the folks were really just more concerned with being able to share their story to help improve community-wide efforts moving forward. Only 1 of those 35 business owners requested an actual copy of the confidentiality form. And then we kind of move into more of the meat of the conversations. The very first question we asked was a pretty simple one. How are you doing right now? How's your business doing right now? So we broke that down by industry and sector. But in general, of the 35 responses we got, 7 of those business owners reported actually doing above average. 14 reported average, and 13 reported below average. We didn't really get an answer on one of those. The main takeaways in this data are really that the outcomes differ greatly between industry sectors and even within the same sectors. In general, for general retail operations, the results are really, really mixed. We have 5 that are above, 6 that are at average, and 5 that are below average. We don't have a huge sampling of the restaurant and bar community, so that was really mixed even within those. Lodging in particular, the long-term lodging and the short-term lodging, I mean hotels and inns, beds and breakfasts, there is not a single one of those, although we only have 3 in there that report doing above average. So that's a sector that's really been hit hard. The real estate, property management, long-term rentals, at least based on this really, really small sample, are doing okay. And then we didn't really have enough information on the other sectors or enough of a sample size to really report anything back on that. Some of the other things for general retail, some of those general retailers have not reopened based on health, management, and capacity concerns. Those that have reopened are mostly busier than they anticipated. That doesn't mean they're doing better than average, but they are busier than anticipated, and some have reported that they are busier than ever. Obviously, in the restaurant and bars, the bars with no food are obviously the hardest hit with the latest reclosures. The restaurants we talk to are at or close to capacities on weekends in particular. but obviously the limited capacity has placed a ceiling on the revenues they can generate before the slow season. And staffing issues have also impacted their ability to stay open 7 days a week like they normally would be throughout the summer. In the lodging community, the short-term lodging community, the rates have not recovered, but the summer occupancy is certainly better than they had originally anticipated, so they're very thankful for that. But the restrictions on their capacity and the cleaning timetables have also placed a ceiling on the revenues they can generate this summer. Again, not enough of a sample really to report on any of the other sectors. All right. Question 8, we just asked whether their business was closed as a result of public health orders or the pandemic. 16 of them reported that they had completely closed. 9 had closed partially. 7 did not close. 3 reported that, yeah, they were allowed to stay open, but they weren't sure if it made much sense for them to stay open. There was a significant drop off in their revenues. So we did ask if they shared any of the specifics. And here we get into some of the difficult information that we'll be communicating, but I promise it's not all bad. And we all share in all of these. So the first thing that we heard really, again, I don't think this is breaking any new ground, but there were high levels of frustration with communications from public health at first. The at first is really important because you'll find out later on that most folks really think that things have improved. We've all learned a lot from our first experiences. So I think it's important that we concentrate on that as well. They expressed some frustrations as to a lack of resources and guidance specific to their operations. And they did say that it was difficult to get responses from all local officials, certainly not just public health. And if they did get a response, oftentimes it was rather inadequate to answer their questions. So again, I think we all had a lot to learn. And a couple of them said, and they kind of used this phrase came up a few times, that the lack of guidance and support fostered a kind of every business for themselves mentality and a self-interpretation of the guidance. And some of them said the way that they interpreted things was a severe detriment to their business, while other businesses interpreted things differently and may have benefited from that. And then D, I've bolded it here for everyone's sake. Some did report that despite various frustrations, they were extremely empathetic and understood that the initial response was never going to be perfect, either from our perspective or from their perspective, and that communications and response times have improved vastly over the past couple of months. So then question 10, we asked them about if they had reopened, how did it go, and what resources did or do they need to continue to stay open. And the main takeaways, actually, some of these are pretty good. Most reported back that the reopening went relatively smoothly once the process was put in place. Some reported, again, initially, some difficulty in getting timely responses to their specific questions. But I think those have all been resolved. And again, I think once the process was in place and the timetables were in place, that improved. A couple, again, Kristen probably talked to all of these, resented having to reapply to reopen. I think there's not much we can do about that. A couple have yet to reopen and still feel that they're being forced to interpret guidance on their own. So we've encouraged them to reach out specifically to public health to work out any of the concerns they might have. And then there was a bright spot that a couple of folks mentioned, more than a couple, that this has really forced a lot of folks in industries within industries to come together and build stronger relationships and support networks. So I think that's a positive thing moving forward. And they can rely on each other as far as best practices and answering industry specific questions. In regards to the resources, again, not breaking any new ground here, personal protective equipment, face coverings, masks, hand sanitizer, gloves, disinfectant. Those were the resources they did need to reopen, and they are still the resources they need to remain open. In regards to what do they need, this is going to come up over and over again. Help with enforcement of the face coverings rule is a huge deal. Business owners and employees have communicated that they're incredibly overwhelmed with having to be on the front line. Most of them understand that it has to be their responsibility and there's not much of a way of avoiding that. But the more support we can give, the better. So I'll touch on that a little bit more. Other resources that they indicated they need are some assistance with e-commerce and their online presence, websites, social media, etc. I think those are things we can help with in the very short term as far as getting them connected to those resources. So and then kind of to add to our communications before and the discussions of our communications committee, a real central location for industry specific guidance. One way or another, it doesn't matter where it lives or where it is, but that's something we heard over and over again. And then another fun question for everybody. How have local governments and organizations handled things so far? I hope that we're encouraged by the fact that we had 9 folks say that it's been handled well. I think some of us may be feeling like we never hear that, but it's true. Yes, 18 said not well, and we had some mixed feelings in regards to some other business owners. But, you know, again, high levels of frustration with communications, central communications, and then responding in a timely manner to inquiries at first. But again, that has improved greatly. A lack of management, this is kind of personally close to my heart, but I was kind of surprised to hear it over and over again from business owners. A lack of management and decision-making in local government in general prevented a more coordinated response and confused communications overall. And that, I think that's a longer standing issue than just pandemic related, but I think folks have seen that it's been exacerbated through the pandemic. So very important to note that we're very appreciative of the efforts on behalf of the county and public health and the city and all of the nonprofit organizations. Those efforts have not gone unnoticed and are extremely appreciated. So please take that to heart as we work through our various stresses and anxieties on a daily basis and moving forward. And again, some were extremely empathetic and noted that they would not want to be in the shoes of any elected officials or public health. Yeah, I don't want to see too vociferous of nodding out there. And then an even more fun question. What have local governments done wrong since the beginning, and what are we still doing wrong? The main takeaways shouldn't be a surprise. Again, the communications, we all need to work on that. A one central hub to rely on and to get information relevant to their specific industry. And the response times from local governments and organizations have certainly improved, but we can still do a better job at getting back to folks, even if we don't have a complete answer, to just let them know that it's going to take us some time to get that complete answer, and make sure we're responding within 24 hours one way or the other. Related to the above, again, a lack of management, decision-making, a lack of adequate and well-trained staff, or longstanding structural issues, not only in our industries, but in their industries as well. They absolutely understand that. But to move the community forward and to be better prepared for future challenges, some named this as what should be the #1 priority and indicated a support of the investment of public funds to accomplish this goal. And then some in the Spanish-speaking community have, a few said they were skeptical, of government's role in helping businesses, but they do feel like they have been left behind a bit in some of the communications, and in particular in being connected with resources available to local businesses to help them through this difficult time. And some remain frustrated about the cancellation of all the events and would like a more concerted effort to support some smaller events moving forward. The events issue did come up more than a few times. I think probably more when we initially started having the conversations, a little less later. So I think the timing of these conversations I've found has been really important because things change in a couple of weeks or 3 weeks. So our follow-up conversations, I think, are going to be incredibly enlightening when we go back and talk to some of the business owners that we talked to at first, to see if any of their responses change or what their current concerns might be. The next question, did the business owner wish to know more about our response efforts? We wanted to give folks an opportunity to talk about what we have been doing. We didn't want to just fall on our swords completely here. So 17 of them actually said no, they were pretty well versed and very appreciative of what has been going on community-wide. So that was awesome. 16 were interested in learning more about some of the response efforts. And I've just bolded a couple of the ones that were most asked about, and that was, again, continuing to connect with funding options moving forward, any grant opportunities, loans, et cetera. And I know the EDC has been doing a heck of a job at doing that. So I think those resources are available.
I think you might be frozen, Chad. Either that or you're really good at not blinking for a long time. You're leaving us in suspense. There he comes. Probably connecting again.
Sorry, guys, just kicked me out for some reason.
I know the suspense is building. Let's see. You were at. Do you know where you're at when we lost you?
I do know where I'm at. Let me share
Okay.
my screen again.
Okay.
All right. Sorry about that. They must have thought I was talking too long anyway. We're at question 14. What can we all do better? So this is not just local government, but nonprofits and the community in general. And again, these next two questions are probably, to me, they're more about what we can do forward. It's about diagnosing what we did poorly before. So these are really my biggest takeaways, and not in any order of priority either. The first one was the takeaways that Marla and I pulled from these aggregated comments are really that from the local government and nonprofit world, we can do a better job at understanding the challenges that they're facing from their point of view and the point of view of specific industries rather than from our point of view. And we should be willing and able and happy to use local businesses as more of a resource when we're trying to figure out things and trying to figure out what are the best answers to their particular questions. You know, we can work with them to come up with those answers. And I think public health in particular has been doing a good job. And we've gotten some comments about the fact that they're doing that in an improved manner here in the last month or two. B, I've heard from a number of different businesses, and then we had a number of different comments about how we need to lead by example in following the public health guidelines and in providing better and more timely service. We are, again, a service-based industry. That's what we do. We provide service. We serve a community whose economy is largely based on service. So it's up to us and it's up to business owners to set that example in the provision of service. Business owners have indicated that they can better partner amongst themselves within their own industries to advocate for specific guidelines and to develop best practices if those best practices are not already developed or if specific guidelines or specific guidance might not be available. I think that's something that's going to come out of this, this challenge. Again, help with enforcement of face coverings across the board. Whatever we can do to help relieve some of that responsibility or to at least make them feel like they're being supported in making sure folks have face coverings is huge. From their perspective and from our perspective, more adequate hiring of staff and training, easier said than done. and then a better defined decision-making and communications structure. Structure was a big thing that came up, just that word in general. Those structures for management, decision-making, and communications are going to be key. Providing a central website with links from there so the owners can go to one place to find information or the resources that can get them that information. I believe we've talked about that quite a bit. A more effective and efficient distribution system for publicly available supplies like masks and hand sanitizer. I'm not sure where we could talk about something like that, but I think that's something we could probably do. I don't think that's necessarily, if the supplies are available, a system should not be too difficult to create from all of our perspectives. A support of smaller events that liven up the community. A commitment of resources to hiring administrators and managers for the city and for the county. And then really this is a plan for another possible shutdown. Are we learning from our mistakes, and are we trying to put processes in place to better deal with, planning for the worst? Are we planning for the worst, and will we be able to put those plans in place? Question 15, what more does the business need from the community to sustain throughout the year? Governments must aggressively pursue all possible funding resources, and I think we are doing so, so that more resources might be available to businesses and nonprofits as pass-throughs. Again, I think we're doing a good job on that. We just need to keep up those efforts. Again, desperate need of help in enforcement of wearing face coverings, the supplies and a better system for the distribution of such. And this one is something I really like. Community-wide commitment to supporting each other, not pointing fingers or placing the blame, trying to remain positive, expressing gratitude and empathy. We're all under a tremendous amount of pressure right now, and that gratitude and empathy might be the most important thing moving forward. They also indicated a real need to focus on marketing to build up businesses from September through December. I think the work of the tourism panel on the LIO, the letter of intent for that craft funding, is an important piece of that puzzle. So thanks again to Donna for coordinating that effort and getting that done. And then connecting their businesses with the expert resources to help them improve their marketing, their e-commerce, and their social media presence, which again, I think John with SCORE and the EDC have really been helping out a lot with. So more we can do in that arena, the better. And then, the good news as far as the feedback from these conversations is that 28 of the 35 are very interested in keeping the conversation going. Only 3 of them said, no, we'll get in touch if necessary. But 2 of them were like, stop talking to me. But for the most part, they want to keep these conversations going. They get that we're trying to form a long-term relationship. And they want to form that ongoing relationship with the advocate that has already spoken with them. So I've just, Marla and I put together some real main takeaways and possible action items, both short-term and long-term. I think these are the real important things. In the short term, most expect that the county website is the hub for the information, and an easily accessible and understandable central hub with links to the information and resources for businesses by industry is critical. So we all need to be working on that in some way, shape, or form, and I think we are. If the county and city are purchasing supplies, a more effective, efficient, and equitable system needs to be developed for distribution. Again, businesses desperately need some support in enforcing face covering rules. Electronic signs at either end of Leadville could be used. I think we have them. They might be CDOT. I don't know if those could be reprogrammed. Local law or code enforcement. Business owners are hoping that they will get involved, at least in some of the communications as far as this stuff. And I'm hoping that based on the new statewide order, we're finding out in the last week, and hopefully this week, that compliance has increased. But we'll have to do some other outreach efforts to figure that out as far as if it really has increased. We need to continue our outreach efforts and make them meaningful. So that will be the job of the Business Advocacy and Resiliency Subcommittee moving forward is to not only continue and expand our outreach efforts, but to really make sure that they're meaningful and that the business owners feel the positive impacts of this program. Next, we can start planning. I know we already have on how we can implement the lessons learned from the first shutdown. So if another one needs to happen, it can be more targeted by industry perhaps, and allow for more creative continuation of businesses now that we know that perhaps some things might be safe and some things might not. So if we can really start on that planning process or put some plans in place, that would be great. And then more clearly define and communicate the roles of Main Street, EDC, the Tourism Panel, and Chamber of Commerce. I think there was a big boom summit a few years ago in regards to this, and I have a bunch of documentation on that. And Donna has also coordinated a meeting between our groups for next week where we will be revisiting the results of that boom summit and where we're at now as organizations and exactly where we can provide value to the community, setting those expectations and making sure we're all aware of those expectations so we can communicate them effectively when people reach out to us. So we are working on that particular goal. And then a couple of long-term goals, again, restructure local governments to improve management, decision-making, and communications, more adequate staff training and hiring. Again, all of this requires a ton of public investment and a ton of public buy-in. And then building sustainable programs within our existing organizations to continually communicate with and learn from local business owners. So I'm tired of talking. What do you guys got?
Thank you, Chad.
Yeah, I really appreciate how you and Marla synthesized that in just a couple of days. And Chad, we had how many people working on this?
That number's relatively up and down right now. I think we originally had 16 folks that had been identified. But I think, goodness, maybe I can get some information here as to how many have actually responded. I think only about 7 or 8 folks have submitted reports. That might be up to 10. So we might have a maximum of 10. But then we do have the Líderes Latinos who are doing their outreach. And I know some folks have asked to be able to hold off for a bit to see how that list gets pared down. And we're also working in that committee to really try to identify some more partners moving forward that could be part of this longer term. Again, I think, a lot of our elected officials and a lot of our staff members are just simply overwhelmed right now and would love to be able to contribute, but are finding that it's much more difficult and time consuming than they had originally expected. So yeah, I would say about 10 is how many we have right now.
Okay, great. And then just to note that I know in terms of getting responses and connecting with business owners, when we started this, things hadn't been reopened and since then have reopened. And so I think just business owners being busy, which is not a bad thing, has also been another factor in that. So definitely we'll keep working on increasing that population size. But just thank you so much for coordinating, you and John being willing to sort of do that initial training and put it together. So and just to recognize this is a structure that was built from scratch. So it did take a little while for it to come together and can easily be replicated and built upon going forward. So let's get some feedback and thoughts on what are the initial reactions to this. But I just wanted to thank you also, Chad.
Mm-hmm. Well, and thank Ms. Kristen Logan, because she is by far the winner as to how many businesses she's communicated with. So thank you to Kristen.
I guess I'll jump in. No, and I do have a handful more that I did not submit through the link yet either, Chad, but definitely am happy to hear some of those highlights on, administrative and management, because like you said, Kayla and I went out and distributed masks and hand sanitizer, and I think I went half a block in about an hour and a half. So it is not, which is great. Like I had conversations and, you know, you get stopped and you have meaningful interactions with people, even if they weren't the business owners, but that is just the reality. And I wish that, you know, all the elected officials had time to walk up and down Harrison and help, you know, with enforcement and greeting folks. And it's just not the reality of how we can spend our time. But I appreciate that. And I also think that the part of that CARES Act funding, not only in communication, but, you know, I did also hear some kind of mention of that help of enforcement and ambassadors, if you will, to walk up and down the street and kind of greet folks and, you know, thank them for wearing a mask or ask them if they left theirs in the car and, you know that you're going to walk into a business and be asked to wear a mask and they'll have one for you. You know, just that icebreaker sort of, because as many of us are, you know, what I heard was people are just kind of exhausted and overwhelmed with the conflict and the enforcement piece of that. So I think that's, and you know, again, too, I did put in the chat, Jamie is here from the SBDC and she put in some information over there, which I think is incredibly important for us to know. The other thing that I did have a conversation this morning with a business owner in town who happened to mention that grant funding, that Energize Colorado, and they were super excited about a new resource that they're eligible for. So she didn't know how she got on the email list for the SBDC, but she was stoked about getting it and said that that was, you know, probably the most helpful correspondence that she's gotten so far. And I invited Jamie just to listen in on what our feedback from the community looks like, and to hopefully have y'all at least a brief intro to reach out, because I really believe after listening to the resources yesterday that is a avenue that we can direct people really simply and effectively without kind of recreating the wheel on some things. So yeah. I think I'll stop.
Thanks, Chad, for putting that together. I think it's really helpful information to know.
Yeah, and again, I will be presenting information like this in a more digestible fashion moving forward. I think presenting it like that was fairly tiresome, probably for everyone, mostly for myself, but happy to do it. Marla and I have really worked hard on kind of doing our analyses separately and then reviewing what we have come up with, what the other one has come up with, so that we can ensure we're kind of doing our best to remove whatever biases we might have from that. So I think that process is working pretty well. It does take a bit of time, but I think it's important work. And I think, you know, we're going to have another meeting of the business advocacy group here in a week or two, and we will discuss what the results are so far, how much of this initial kind of questionnaire or script, how far do we want to take that, and then really come back to this committee to say, okay, when we do follow-ups or when we're in our next phase of the process, what specific questions should we be asking? What conversations should we be having? What's going to be most useful as far as you know, public funding or public plans, et cetera. So we're already starting to think about next steps, but I think we do want to get a larger sample with these initial questions before we really start moving forward.
Chad, one of the things I think would be important is to start getting some sort of an idea of a communication tool to go back to the businesses on some of these plans that you're talking about, if they can be agreed upon, because I think that's one of the key things that they're looking for is action. And it's fine that we talk about it here, or that you guys talk about it here, but to show some sort of steps, even just saying that we got the first initial through, we hope to have the next to finish by 2 weeks from now, and after that have something out. Maybe if nothing else, an email that goes out to all the businesses that says that. As a way of going about it, but showing action by the different committees, I think, needs to be more visible.
Yep, it certainly makes a lot of sense to me, John. The plan certainly is for us advocates to reach back out at least within the next 2 weeks or after our next meeting to really schedule that out and say, okay, it's time to go back. Tell them what we've been doing, tell them what's going on. And I think those short-term goals that I mentioned at the end of this report, the supplies distribution, if we're going to get some more supplies, what we're talking about or what could happen in regards to some support in enforcing those face covering rules, what we're doing as far as a centralized communications hub. I think those are pretty important things for us to be able to communicate back out. And I also think, when I keep talking about communications, I think there's also we should communicate our communications better. I think these resources are available to folks. It's just a matter of connecting them properly. I do think there is a centralized locations for public health information and a centralized location for some other stuff, but again, we could all communicate that more effectively. So yes, I want to discuss this in our next business advocacy meeting and come up with a list of the actions that not only that committee has taken, but we've all taken. And if you all could help me in providing that list or making sure some of these things can really happen over the next couple of weeks, that would be awesome.
So this is Donna, just a couple thoughts to add to that. We had been doing, by we I mean me, I've been doing the Friday business updates. We, in conjunction with people, have been sending me things. I haven't sent one for the last couple weeks because I haven't been receiving things. And I feel like, in the beginning, there was sort of a deluge of resources coming through. And thankfully for all of us, that need has slowed down. And so that information stream has slowed down. But that is still available. Maybe that would be a good way to communicate some of this out. And then as we're talking about communication structure and long-term planning, ultimately I would like for this to live with someone else. I'm happy to volunteer, yes. But it just doesn't feel like a tourism panel function ongoing. But again, I'm happy to do it temporarily while we're trying to get through this period. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that the tourism panel has been feeling this challenge of lack of strong communication with businesses, that sometimes when we do reach out, we really don't get much response. Like even earlier this year when we said, oh, we're going to add a shopping section to the website, we'd love to feature your business in it if you have a retail shop, and it was just crickets, and we tried several ways to get that out. So one thing that we've talked about is trying to make more of an effort to reach out directly to businesses. And at the meeting on Tuesday, we approved a very small expense to just print up some stickers with the logo and the URL of the tourism panel, as we started to learn that some people don't even really know that that website exists. And then to create a one-pager as to, what we are, what we do. And on basis of what Chad just shared, I also wrote down what are some things that we did for the crisis response, just so that people will know who we are, will see us as a resource. We can more easily reach out to them with resources as well, such as when we get requests from the state office to, hey, there's a journalist that wants to write about XYZ. Do you have anybody? That can be kind of difficult to facilitate right now. And so we would like also that stronger back and forth to benefit everyone. So I just throw out that that's something that's a very small part of the effort, but that is happening.
And look, I know that we probably all understand, and I in particular understand that this communications is a two-way street. You know, folks do have to communicate with us as well, as we have to communicate with them. And I have been having a little bit of that conversation, you know, certainly not in an adversarial manner. But you know, some folks, oh, well, I don't use Facebook, or you know, I don't like the internet and stuff like that. And I get it. I don't use social media either. But if I know that is the source of information that I desperately need or want, then I have to go there. So part of our communications strategy, I think, moving forward, should be a little bit of, you know, I wouldn't call it tough love, but, you know, a little bit of direct that, you know, we always don't have the bandwidth to come to your bedroom window and throw pebbles at it at 11 o'clock at night if that's when you're available. I mean, I think it's important that we acknowledge that. I think business owners in particular will respect that. They don't always have the time when we have the time, that we work on different schedules. You know, so it's a balancing act all the way around. I think we can all have those communications like adults, right?
I like the Pebbles idea. I think that would be effective. Maybe not well received, but it would definitely get attention.
I'm not available on Wednesday evening.
We often joke in emergency management, if all the power goes down, we'll just ride a horse through town with a megaphone.
I've been looking for a town crier job for years. I'm not sure it's available anywhere.
Maybe
I
that's.
think CARES Act will fund it.
Website. Call your website the Pebbles.
Hey, Chad, I'm curious. So, I mean, it seems like, and understandably, it was, you know, a slow start to establish a communication structure, and we recognize it still has some pretty gaping deficiencies that we're working on. But it does seem like a theme is that things improved over time. So I'm curious if anything was named explicitly, you know, either a tactic or approach or a tool that people identified as being something that they attributed to that improvement. You know, so we get some sort of feedback on the specific elements, and was it the town halls or the weekly email summaries or the COVID dashboard? I mean, any sort of insight as to what it was that they feel helped with that improvement?
From the comments that were submitted, Beth, I think it was mainly just improved response times as far as getting questions answered, phone calls, emails, etc. I think that was a big piece of the puzzle. I think the COVID dashboard certainly helped in regards to that specific public health information that the businesses, their owners or their families were really looking for. But unfortunately, I do not have much more detail. I can go back and look through these comments to see if there were more specifics. I tried to pull out as many specifics and actionable items as I really could. But let me go back through and just double check, because if there is some tidbits in there as far as what has really worked, yeah, I think that definitely needs to be communicated to you. And I just want to personally apologize, Beth. I didn't know until 3 weeks ago that this wasn't like your official role. You are doing a hell of a job, and I want to make sure I communicate that to you because yeah, it wasn't until about 3 weeks ago that I figured that out. So thanks for everything that you're doing. I'll get back.
Yeah, no, thanks for being a part of figuring it out. Yeah, obviously, had there been someone sort of instilled in this position at the outset, I think we would be in a different position. So that's why we're figuring it out now. And I'm curious, you know, as this is sort of married with the feedback from the different responding agencies and different stakeholders, I think it's going to paint a pretty clear picture. We've always got some consistent areas that have been identified. So I honestly think that, you know, towards the end of August, you know, when you've had the next round of conversations and we've had the one-on-ones, I think we're going to be able to put together a pretty solid path forward, which is exciting for the community from my perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll also say to that, to the capacity, having the capacity of people, some of the more recent conversations I've had in the last week, informing people even just of the simple fact that Marla is here. We have an EDC director. Like, we did not have an EDC director. Jamie was up to her eyeballs with SBDC. Chad just came in, we, for all intents and purposes, didn't really have these positions filled, as Beth just mentioned with the PIO or have them expectations well laid out. So that has been a big eye opener for a lot of businesses that I talk to. Just saying, even in opening emails with the EDC, I heard many times, I don't even open the emails anymore. It's just too much. And so when I tell them that we have Marla, and hopefully that makes a difference, because you can know that there's been some vetting and a thoughtful reason to push this communication out to you. That's hopefully going to make a world of difference as well.
Absolutely.
Beth, I'm wondering, would you suggest in a follow-up form as we, maybe create that next data collection point, the follow-up form and Google form, that we ask something like, were you able to participate in a town hall? To Sarah's comment, do you read your EDC emails? Some of those specific things that have happened, would it be helpful to know that?
A little bit. I think what I'm, what I think in terms of us identifying what sort of communication tools and mechanisms other than the Pebbles solution, because I don't think we're super excited about that regardless of the request, really is understanding, and I know this was named as an objective of the communications committee before, is to identify what are the ways that you would like to receive communication, because that's, we're finding just as important as what is it that you need to receive. So, if we're sending out really valuable and actionable information, but nobody's going to the site or opening the email, it doesn't matter, what we're sharing with them, because they're not engaging with it. So I think, Janine, maybe it's more of a list of different tactics that we would feel comfortable and have capacity to execute on, and get a sense from businesses of, what are the ways. Obviously, we know that there needs to be a database that's comprehensive and current, but is it emails? Is it, the website, which we've identified? Is it the interactive town halls? Whatever we identify can go in our toolkit of communication tactics, and getting input from businesses on what are the ways that they want to engage with the information that we share. Because, all the good information in the world isn't going to do it's not going to be effective if people aren't actually engaging with it.
Well,
so I don't know that we need to go back and grade interaction with what we tried, but maybe it's more sort of future state,
Beth, and let me be clear too.
Beth, I think one of the other aspects of that is not just information that's going out, but as somebody mentioned earlier, if we can educate, which would be easy to do, where businesses go centrally to get information, that may take a big load off of what you guys are trying to do. Because lots of times businesses look for information on their own time schedule, as opposed to just the newspapers or the Facebook, where they have to go out whenever they happen to think of it, or whenever you send them out. So I think that having that central resource for that might make a big, big difference.
Yep.
Oh, I agree 100%, John. And I think it's probably a combination. We want to make sure that it's passively available at all times and current and comprehensive. But I think what we've learned, with this pandemic situation, sometimes public health had, 3 hours advance notice that they needed to amend the public health order that had significant changes on what businesses needed to do in order to be compliant. And that wasn't the fault of local public health. That was the way that the governor and the state moved on things. And so wanting to make sure that we have the ability to sort of virtually knock on people's doors when they need to pay particular attention as well as have that available on a platform that they can go and then dig deeper. So I think it's a both and.
And just to comment on that particular issue, certainly, John, we are working on that and are going to be meeting next week. And we've got some really good resources that from older EDC administrations and from the city that I've gotten in regards to the outcomes from that old Boom Summit, an old Business 101 packet for new business owners that was put together by previous administrations. So I think as far as having that central hub for business owners, in regards to various resources, I think that's something that we can accomplish fairly quickly and are going to be working on in the very, very near future. In regards to business owners' preferred method of contact, let me be clear, I did not report on that part of what our advocates have been submitting back to us. I focused this one on the second Google form because it was the biggest amount of information, but we do have that data available, at least as far as what those owners reported back to us as their preferred method of communication. And that information is not confidential. It is associated with their business and the particular owner. So we can certainly get that information to whomever or whichever group is in need of that information. And even if it's just a matter of saying, oh, well, 30% of people would prefer Facebook and 20% of people prefer text or whatever, at least it would give you a sense of, well, we need to focus most of our communications resources on these few things and less maybe on some other areas. So I will share that information out certainly by the next time we have a report in this committee, but if you would like some more information beforehand, let me know. We have it.
Thanks, Chad. Yeah, I think that would be helpful. And, you know, I don't think that we're going to be in a place where it's so sophisticated soon that we get to sort of customize, like you said, the package of comms for any given business, but just making sure that we're not overlooking any particular tactic. And then just knowing we've got within the capacity all of those met so that people have the ability to engage with the different media that work for them.
Yeah, and I think, Chad, like you were just saying, a percentages of who's using what, if there's any trends that you're seeing, that would be good. But, you know, certainly it's been identified in this meeting and others, the need for that central website resource. But, you know, once we have that, or once we have other plans for how we're going to communicate, you know, you come with the message and then you can share it out on all of those different channels. So,
yep,
you know, I think that would work well, but I too would be really curious to know what you hear in terms of the most popular forms of communication.
I think what you're going to find is that in person is by far the most preferred, which is not necessarily the most realistic expectation.
Not for a public health order that's written at midnight, I can tell you that much.
No.
Yeah, it's not. And I think that comes back to some of the communication as a two-way street. Maybe you have the in-person meetings and let people know if it's something urgent, this is where you're going to find it, you know, yeah. Or if you have questions, this is where you can go and get it clarified. But yeah.
Communications about our communications.
Sometimes you got to do it.
Chad, I'm curious, this is Janine, if the several times that folks talked about management and positions within local government, were there any specifics on what that meant?
Mainly that we all need damn managers. Pretty basic. We need a county administrator and we need a city manager. That was the main thing. But otherwise, I think there were a couple of comments in one particular industry, I would say, about the training of some staff members who were responsible perhaps for some inspections and for some interpretations. So, but I'm not sure if that's new information for you guys, but yeah, a county administrator and a city manager and investing the resources necessary for that were big topics.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Any other reactions or? So what are the next steps
Chad, can you outline a little bit what the timeline is going to look like from here?
Sure. Next week, we're meeting with Líderes Latinos to make sure that we're properly folding in the feedback from the Spanish-speaking business owner community. We are hoping to fill out much more than 35 of those business responses. And then in 2 weeks, have a better, more complete report, at least more statistically sound. So we're hoping to get up maybe to double this number from 35 to 70. Certainly we need to get over 50. And then see if we're hearing many of the same things, if this report has to change. And then developing a new report, a more digestible report that can be used moving forward for this particular committee. And then again, in our meeting in 2 weeks, really then discussing what our next steps really should be. And hopefully with some guidance from this particular committee as well, or from your various organizations or departments as to what information you would like us to be communicating, or information that you would like us to gather from the business owners. And again, I think part of my goals for that particular committee are going to be circling back around to find out if folks' views have changed, or find out how their businesses are doing. And those will be much shorter conversations, in those follow-up conversations, I think. But I think it would be helpful for us to get a sense of you know, how their attitudes may have changed, or what needs have arisen since we last talked to them. But certainly I envision our group as being a way to gather information that you all might find useful in the decision-making moving forward. So, you know, we're going to rely on you guys a lot for those follow-up questions, or for new questionnaires, etc. I do think people are surveyed out, and perhaps even though we've only been able to talk to 35 people, it might be a better source of information for specific questions, or a way to support a survey response as well, that we could work in concert perhaps.
Other thoughts or questions? Okay, well, I really appreciate everybody's time on this today. It's been very helpful, and I think what we've been doing is every other week. Is that sort of what everybody's good with, or does anyone feel like we need to meet next week? And I think that's what Kayla had in mind. So let's just plan on meeting again in 2 weeks, and I'm sure she'll get information to you before then, if needed. Okay, thank you all.
Thanks for listening to me for an hour. I appreciate it. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, everyone.